Well, welcome to 2020, a year where many economists have been put in a position where they have to try to determine when new vaccines to a deadly virus are going to get approved by regulatory authorities, while infectious disease specialists are becoming economic pundits. It's a reminder these stories are very much linked, solving COVID-19 and the economic recovery. Let's get more perspective on the road ahead now from David Dodge. He's the former Bank of Canada governor and a senior advisor at Bennett Jones. Mr. Dodge, thanks very much for joining us. As always, nice to have you back on the program.
Good morning, John.
Let's start with the recent spike in cases and your reaction to that.
Well, I think we always expected this. In fact, in some ways, we've had a little bit of a reprieve earlier than we thought this year, and we're going to be bumping along in one way or another until the second half of 2021, because it's only then that there will be hopefully sufficient distribution of vaccine that the fear factor, which has been holding the economy back, will begin to dissipate.
And obviously, in the world of economics, it helps when you can have a pretty robust data set. I suppose at this stage of the game, we have, give or take 8 months worth of looking at how we've responded so far and how we continue to respond. But what's been your takeaway on how we address this issue? What is the best way to position our economy in the best spot going forward?
Well, there is no best way. I guess what we're looking for is the least worst way to work our way through this. And what we appear to have decided on for political reasons, small p political reasons, both in, basically throughout the OECD world, but certainly both in North America and in Europe, is that we will operate in such a way to tamp down demand on hospital services to the point where we can somehow manage it. And that has meant on again, off again, hard distancing, soft distancing, and we will undoubtedly continue to struggle with that in most of the Western economies right through until there's reasonably widespread distribution of vaccine, which clearly will not occur until the second half of 21.
And let's look at this from the perspective of business owners. Some are skeptical of the government when they take these steps, perhaps rightfully so. It just depends on, I imagine, what kind of business you're running. The government has obviously put a lot of money to work and tried to target a lot of aid to those businesses. What's been your assessment, though, of the strategy so far and where improvements could be made?
Well, I think the initial strategy, governments did what they had to do. They were caught by surprise. Perhaps that was a mistake, but they were caught by surprise. And what they did, certainly in North America, we basically said we will try to compensate folks as businesses had to close down to facilitate social distancing. Our strategy in North America has been a little different than in Europe or some other places like Japan, where the effort has been to keep everybody attached to their employer in some way, shape, or form, rather than to allow the unemployment to become overt, if you will. So those were different strategies to deal with business. And here in Canada, we did kind of a mix of the two. Big support for workers that were thrown into unemployment, but some support through the Canada Wage Subsidy to try also maintain worker contact with the employer and keep businesses ready, if you will, to be able to reopen more fully when the opportunity arose. And we are now basically decided we will extend both aspects of that strategy at least through until June.
But you used the words earlier, political reasons. I know you weren't referencing Canada. You were just talking more broadly speaking. But if there were no political ramifications, which is not a reality or a world that we live in, but assuming there weren't, what would be the best path forward in your economic opinion?
Well, best is, as I say, there's no best. It's the least worst. And so it's always a trade-off between health now and output now. I think my own view has always been that we would have been better, and probably still are better, to have to take an Australian approach. But the time for that may in fact be past, because we've now got this peak. But clearly, had we done, once we opened the schools, if we had just slammed everything else shut, we might have been able to maintain that very low rate of infection that we had earlier. But it is very difficult, and as I said, we seem to have opted for the, if you will, the on-again, off-again distancing strategy, which kind of spreads the pain over time, and we'll have to keep spreading it until the fear factor diminishes, which hopefully will be sometime in the second half of 21. No guarantee of that, of course, but I think that's the view that I take, that's likely when that will happen. And so it really will not be until sometime in 2022 that we can really look to be getting back to, not getting back, I don't want to use that word, to reopening without the fear factor of COVID dominating the actions of business and workers.
And has the vaccine news over the last week, first from Pfizer and then Moderna this week, has that influenced your thinking on that time frame?
It probably has pulled it forward a little bit. I was just looking before we talked at some notes that I had written in August. And at that point, I was saying, well, it probably means that it's only going to be in the first half of 2022 that the fear factor will have diminished. So, yes, I think the success of the mRNA drugs, these are not drugs, but vaccines, these two new types of vaccine, amazing scientific breakthrough. The fact that those seem to be coming on more quickly than one might have thought last summer, I think has advanced a little bit. But as I say, it's still going to be well into the fall of 2021 before the fear factor will really have begun to diminish sufficiently to allow businesses to reopen fully.
A dance around psychology and science, a complicated time. Mr. Dodge, thanks as always for sharing your perspective on this.
You take care, John. Pleasure talking to you.
You as well. Nice to have you back. Former Bank of Canada Governor David Dodge joining